The little girl stood outside the bakery window, staring at a chocolate cake as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Her worn white dress was slightly too large for her, and she held her mother's hand tightly while watching customers carry beautiful boxes of fresh pastries out through the glass doors. Then, in a voice so soft that almost nobody noticed, she asked her mother the question that would change both their lives. "Mommy, do you think they have an expired cake they don't need anymore?" Behind them, a wealthy man in an expensive black suit had just stepped out of his car. He stopped when he heard those words. He had been in a hurry, but suddenly, he could not take another step. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can give people second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these heart-touching stories reach more people who believe that one small act of kindness can change a life. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon in the heart of the city, with sunlight pouring through the bakery's enormous windows and turning the busy street outside into a scene of movement and color. Inside the bakery, customers laughed over coffee, children pointed at colorful cupcakes, and trays of freshly baked bread filled the glass counters. Behind the main counter stood 29-year-old Elias Mercer, the bakery's assistant manager, working beside 27-year-old Priya Dalin, who had been decorating pastries since early morning. Neither of them noticed the woman and her daughter standing outside until the little girl pressed her hands against the glass. Her name was Mara Vey, 34 years old, a tired single mother who had learned to measure every purchase against the few bills left in her wallet. Beside her stood her 7-year-old daughter, Ilara, whose curly brown hair was tied with a faded blue ribbon. Ilara had been talking about her birthday for weeks. She did not want toys or an expensive party. She wanted only one thing, a cake with chocolate frosting. Mara had promised her that somehow they would celebrate. But that morning, after paying for rent, transportation, and groceries, she had counted the remaining money several times. It was not enough for even the smallest decorated cake. She had spent the afternoon walking from one bakery to another, hoping to find something affordable. Every place had been too expensive. Now she stood outside the final bakery, trying to smile while her daughter stared at the cakes. Mara gently lowered herself beside Ilara and whispered that they should go home. But Ilara looked through the glass again and asked whether the bakery might have an older cake they could give away, perhaps something that had passed its display date but was still safe to handle in another way. She did not understand the rules of food safety. She only understood that beautiful cakes were thrown away every day while some children wished they could have even a small one. Mara's face immediately filled with embarrassment. She had not wanted anyone to hear. She squeezed her daughter's hand and turned toward the door. That was when a deep voice came from behind them. "Excuse me." Mara turned. A tall 62-year-old man stood several feet away. His silver hair was neatly combed, his charcoal suit perfectly fitted, and his expression was unusually serious. His name was Julian Ashford, a well-known millionaire whose company owned several buildings across the city, including the bakery they were standing outside. But Mara did not know any of that. She simply looked at him nervously and assumed he was another wealthy customer. Julian looked at Ilara, then at Mara. He had heard the entire conversation. Instead of asking why they wanted an old cake, he walked toward the bakery and opened the door for them. Mara hesitated. Julian simply smiled and told them that they should come inside. Ilara looked at her mother, and after a moment, they entered. The bakery suddenly felt different to Mara. She became conscious of her worn shoes, her faded coat, and the tiny amount of money in her purse. She quietly asked Elias whether there was anything inexpensive available. Elias glanced at Julian, who gave him a subtle signal not to make a big deal out of the situation. Elias asked Ilara what kind of cake she liked. Her eyes brightened immediately. Chocolate. But before anyone could offer her something, Mara quickly explained that she could not afford a regular cake. She said she had only come because her daughter had been hoping for something special, and she would understand if there was nothing they could do. Julian listened silently. Then he asked Alara what she wanted most for her birthday. The little girl thought for several seconds before answering that she wanted her mother to smile. The bakery became strangely quiet. Mara lowered her eyes. She had spent months pretending everything was fine for her daughter. She had hidden overdue notices, skipped meals without telling Alara, and worked temporary cleaning jobs whenever she could find them. She had never wanted sympathy. She wanted stability. Julian understood that immediately. He asked Mara about her work. She explained that she had recently lost her regular job when the small office where she worked closed unexpectedly. Since then, she had applied everywhere, but employers wanted experience she did not have or schedules she could not manage because of her daughter. Julian asked whether she would accept an opportunity if one appeared. Mara looked suspiciously at him and said she did not want charity. Julian nodded. He respected that answer. Instead of giving her money, he turned toward Elias and asked whether the bakery needed another employee. Elias almost smiled because he already knew where this was going. The bakery needed someone for morning preparation, inventory assistance, packaging, and customer service. It was not glamorous work, but it was steady work with predictable hours. Mara stood frozen. She asked whether Julian was serious. He told her that she would have to earn the position like anyone else. There would be no special treatment, and she would need to show up on time and do the work. For the first time that afternoon, Mara smiled. She accepted. But Julian was not finished. He looked at Alara and asked Elias whether the bakery could make a small birthday cake for her. Elias nodded. Mara immediately tried to refuse. She said she could not accept something that expensive. Julian explained that the cake was not charity either. It would be a welcome gift for a new employee's daughter. That explanation mattered. Mara finally agreed. Alara watched as Elias carefully prepared a small chocolate cake with simple white frosting and a few colorful decorations. She stood beside the counter, watching every step as though she were witnessing magic. Julian remained nearby. He noticed something else. Alara was not staring at the expensive decorations or the pastries anymore. She was watching her mother. Mara was smiling. A real smile. Julian had seen thousands of expensive celebrations in his lifetime. He had attended luxury dinners, corporate parties, and events where cakes cost more than some people earned in months. Yet that small bakery cake seemed more meaningful than all of them. Later that afternoon, Mara officially began her first training shift. She was nervous, but Elias patiently showed her how everything worked. Priya helped her organize the shelves, and within a few hours, Mara had learned more than she expected. Alara sat at a small table near the window, coloring on a sheet of paper while waiting for her mother. When the cake was finally placed in front of her, she did not immediately eat it. Instead, she asked whether she could take it home so her mother could have the first piece. Mara covered her face for a moment. Julian looked away, giving them privacy. That evening, something unexpected happened. Julian returned to his office and asked his assistant to bring him the financial reports from the bakery. As he reviewed them, he discovered that the bakery had been losing money because several unsold products were being discarded every evening. Julian thought about Alara's question. He knew that food past its safe quality or storage limits should never simply be given to someone. But he also realized that there were perfectly safe ways to reduce waste and help families who were struggling. So he created a new program. Every evening, properly handled products that were still safe and within food safety requirements would be redirected through local community organizations. Fresh items could be donated instead of wasted, and customers could also contribute toward prepaid meal and dessert vouchers for families in need. He named the program the Open Table Project. Mara became one of the first employees to help organize it. Within months, the bakery changed. People began donating small amounts at checkout. Local shelters and community centers partnered with the bakery. Families received fresh bread, pastries, and birthday treats through the program. But the biggest change happened inside Mara. She was no longer walking through the city wondering how she would survive the next week. She had a job. She had dignity. And Alara had begun to believe that birthdays were not about expensive presents. They were about people showing up for one another. 1 year later, on another bright afternoon, Julian walked into the bakery without telling anyone he was coming. He saw Alara sitting at the same window table. She was older now, wearing a neat blue dress and reading a book. Mara was behind the counter, confidently helping customers. When Alara saw Julian, she ran toward him and handed him a small handmade card. On the front were 3 words written in colorful letters. "Thank you, Mr." Julian opened it. Inside was a drawing of a bakery, a little girl, her mother, and a tall man standing beside them. Underneath, Alara had written a sentence with the careful handwriting of a child. "You didn't give us a cake. You gave us a new beginning." Julian stared at the words for a long moment. He had spent his entire life believing that success meant building bigger companies, owning more buildings, and having enough money that he never needed to worry about tomorrow. But that day, standing inside a small bakery, he finally understood something money had never taught him. Sometimes the greatest thing you can give someone is not money. It is dignity. It is an opportunity. It is the chance to believe tomorrow might be better than today. Mara came over and thanked him, but Julian shook his head. He told her that she had done the hard part. She had kept going when life gave her every reason to stop. She had protected her daughter's hope even when she had almost none left for herself. Then Alara hugged her mother and smiled. The bakery continued serving customers as sunlight filled the windows. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passed. People hurried to work. Life continued. But inside that bakery, one small question from a little girl had created something much bigger than a birthday cake. It had created a place where nobody had to feel ashamed for needing help. And sometimes, that is how kindness works. It begins with one quiet moment. One person listening. One person choosing not to look away. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before we end, I have a special request for you. Comment, "Kindness can change a life," below if you believe one small act of kindness can give someone a second chance. Because somewhere in the world, there may be a mother standing outside a bakery, a child waiting beside her, and someone wondering whether their little problem is worth noticing. It is. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who stops, listens, and says, "Come inside." And that one moment can become the beginning of an entirely different life.